Got to adjust the lighting, but we're live, even though we're adjusting the lighting. Today, we want to talk about a couple things. One, I just posted a video up just recently within the last couple of minutes. Posted a video up on the comparison between CNC ported LS3 heads, those from TrickFlow, and then CNC ported LS7 heads, those came from Bischoff. It's a test that the guys at Brian Tooley Racing did, actually while they were doing other things. In fact, they were nice enough at my request to put the to run the LS3 heads again with the stage 4 camshaft, so that we could get both combinations run with the same camshaft. It was pretty interesting. It was good stuff. Although, in thinking now, I may have made a mistake on the video. I'm gonna have to talk about that. Frosty cold beverage. Oh, that reminds me. I have to give a shout out to, I have to tell a little story and give a shout out to a gentleman that I met up when we were up in Tahoe. So here's the story. We were up at Tahoe, specifically Fallen Leaf Lake, which is where Lisa and I went on our first date, which was awesome. But we were coming back with the dogs and the boys and everything, and we came into the parking lot, and the only place to park was at an angle, because all of this was on a hill. They're all hills up there. All this was parked a little bit up on a hill. So we pulled into the spot. The car was at an angle, and I got out and held onto the door so that it didn't open up, and hit the guy next to me, closed my door. But before I got out and closed the door, I told my son, I said, hey, look, we're at a steep angle. I said, do not let the door open up and hit the other car. I said, because it will. So just to make sure you're holding on to it. And so I got out, and as I was walking by, I thought, should I stand between that door and this car just to make sure that Lisa's car door doesn't swing open? And I'm like, nah, I told him it's good. And then actually what happened? So he opens the door, and it's a heavy door, obviously, and it's at an angle, and it swings open and just nails the car next to us. It's a truck, actually. So as it turns out, very cool, like off-roading 4-wheel drive Toyota Tacoma. And so I'm like, oh man, I'm thinking, okay, great. Now I got to go find the guy wherever he is in this, because we had pulled up to the marina and the store and everything. I'm thinking, okay, great. Now I got to go find this guy and tell him, hey, look, I'm sorry. We got to take care of this. Obviously our insurance will take care of it, and we'll get your door painted and everything, whatever we got to do. And I look down the car, or down the truck, and he's actually sitting back at the back, and he looks over, he goes, is everybody okay? I'm like, dude, I'm so sorry. I said, we're at an angle, and the door swung open and hit your car. I said, so, no problem. I said, I want to come over and take care of it. He goes, well, did it hurt your car? I said, no, I don't think so. I mean, I think it rubbed a little bit of paint or whatever. I said, I don't even think it didn't even put a dent in the door or anything. I said, I think it just transferred paint. I said, but we want to do the right thing. And I'm thinking to myself, I want to do the right thing because I'm a do the right kind of thing guy. But also, it's a good opportunity to demonstrate to your kids that you should always do the right thing. So I'm like, dude, we want to take care of this. He said, honestly, he said, this is a truck I use for four-wheeling. I go, dude, I love these. I love these. It's a little four-wheel drive Toyota. So there's nothing not to love about it. I said, no, this is awesome. I know what these are. These are very cool. I said, I've liked these since back when they ran 22Rs. He goes, oh, okay, cool. You know about Toyotas. I said, yeah. I said, no, this is cool stuff. He said, you know what? He said, I just went off-roading in it today. He said, we drive over the bushes and the weeds. He goes, and we scratch it up all the time. And he says, look at it. He goes, it's an off-road truck. I said, I don't care about it. He said, as long as you guys are okay, and your car's okay, he said, don't even worry about it. I'm like, no, dude. I said, I want to do the right thing. He said, look, man, just don't worry about it. You guys go off, go to the marina, go to the store, wherever you're going. You guys have a good day. So to this guy, thank you very much. That was awesome. He's the right kind of guy. And it's awesome to meet the guy who's obviously a car guy, all-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive, off-roading kind of guy, which is very cool. So my salute to you, Mr. Very, very cool. You give me hope for humanity that there are people out there like that. And then that's kind of awesome. So that's my Tahoe story. Now we can jump right into the if you guys have not seen it, I posted a video on the results of the LS3 versus LS7 head test, and it's awesome. And all the LS7 guys are going to be irate because they didn't make any more power than the LS3. In fact, through a lot of the curve, they made less. And I'm hoping to get, they're not in right now, obviously, but Brian told me, I just talked to him a couple of times today because I wanted to verify results that I got. And now I'm thinking that I may have mislabeled this thing. In the video, I need to check and make sure. I need to check and make sure if this IR test was run with the LS7 heads or if it was run with the LS3 heads. I honestly think it was run with the LS3 heads, and I think I labeled it as the LS7 head. So I'm gonna have to check that and verify that and make sure. Because if it's with the LS7 heads, then the LS7 guys could say, oh, well, but look, it made so much more power with the IR deal that the throttle body, was undersized, or the manifold was restrictive and wasn't allowing the LS7 heads to do, which is a viable deal, which is I want the guys to comment about that. If it's the LS3 heads, then then it's just showing that, hey, an IR manifold makes more power, which is kind of what we expect anyway. I would expect that either way. In fact, that's going to be our poll today. So our poll will be on the oh yeah. I ran out of words. Okay, I'm getting it. I'm working on it. Okay. Do I got one more letter? I do have one more letter. There we go. On the 427, did the 26 horsepower gain, if you guys haven't seen it, surprise, there's going to be a 26 horsepower gain, come from removing the throttle body or from a change in intake design? And for those of you who haven't seen it, I'll explain what happened. So we ran the 427, and when I say we, I mean James. What they did was, and this is very, very cool because I haven't ever done it this way. I don't think that the dyno that Westech has would allow that, or I certainly wouldn't know how to do it because I would have done this differently. But what they did was on the Trinity intake manifold, it's basically three pieces. So the Trinity intake manifold is a common plenum that the throttle body attaches to, and then also runner sections bolt onto the common plenum. So you got the plenum and then two runners. So what they did was run it without the plenum. And normally when we run things on the dyno without a plenum, they have some sort of removable lid. Like I did that with the FR500 Ford manifold. I did it with the Performance Designs carbon PTR intake manifold, because then it's fairly easy. What you do is you just go to wide open throttle on the throttle body that's there. Sometimes you have to hold the lid down, usually not because it has lots of vacuum. So when you go to wide open throttle, all of a sudden there's zero vacuum or near zero vacuum in the plenum, and especially at that low engine speed. Then you could just grab the plenum lid and remove it and take it off. And then you're still at wide open throttle, so you haven't done anything. It goes to wide open throttle, and then you release the dyno and let the thing go through its RPM range. And then you have an ignition kill. You just shut the ignition off, and the dyno goes back to normal, and everything's fine. Unfortunately, on this combination, on the Brian Tooley combination, and I'm going to go ahead and put our poll up there while I'm explaining this. On the Brian Tooley combination, there was no plenum that could be removed. And the reason for that is that runners actually intersected the plenum inside. So there were standoffs in the plenum, I mean, in the runners, so that had to be, that they actually go in and intersect the plenum. So it would, and they bolt to the plenum. So it prohibit you from just lifting the plenum off when the runners are bolted in place. They all have to be bolted together, and then they go on as one common unit. And unfortunately, you couldn't do that. You can't just like go to wide open throttle and lift the plenum off. So what they did was, you can see this in the thumbnail photo, and I'll go ahead and try to show you the thumbnail photo here. And for you guys that are leaving money, thank you very much. And I'll get you all of your questions. I go back and read all the comments. But see, here's the intake that they ran. So for you guys, so what he did, like I said, this section of the runner actually protrudes into the plenum. So you can't just lift the plenum off. It stops you from doing that. So what they did was started the motor like this and ran it like this. So they started the motor essentially at wide open throttle, and you can kind of see that it would be, there's no throttle, there's no throttle in here. There's only one on the front that's not there anymore. So they started it like this, and then were able to load the motor down and then let it run through its normal RPM range like we have with all of the other runners. So that's very, very cool. So essentially it's running as an individual runner manifold and making power, and running it like that versus running it with the common plenum there and the throttle body, it made a lot more power. It added 26 horsepower, most of it coming from the middle to the top of the RPM range. So what do you guys think? Did that power gain just come from the fact that now there's no restriction from the throttle body? Was that it? Did it want it because it had no common plenum, and now it's an IR manifold, and you've fundamentally changed the design of the intake manifold? Let me know what you guys think on the poll, and you guys can try to figure it out. But it's pretty cool stuff. Okay, so what do we got going on here? The other thing, like I said, the LS3 versus the LS7, that head test is also up there. So make sure when you go there, take a look at it. A lot of guys are going to be interested in the LS3 versus LS7 because you get that sort of, bickering back and forth on the LS3 versus the LS7. Hey, which one makes more power? We know in stock form, the LS7 can support more power than a stock LS3. These were both ported versions of those heads. But again, you got the raised runner head with the LS7. It's got a bigger port volume. It's got a bigger intake valve. In this case, it also had more rocker ratio. It's got a lot of stuff going for it. Okay, let's see what you guys got going on. Yes, we are live. Clearly pre-recorded. I don't think so. Always love the content. Richard, watch your video on the port size. The reason why the larger port sizes lost in the mid-range was because of the port velocity airspeed. So you think that's port velocity, but there wasn't much change in port volume between those two ports. So I don't know that that's it. I think you should point more probably toward the valve size than anything. I haven't seen the kind of change that we're talking about in port volume, a few cc's, be anywhere near that significant in airspeed. I mean, I know that the internet level of logic that's there, but I don't agree with that. I don't think that that's what it is in this case. And I haven't seen that in even more dramatic changes in port volume. I use your information countless times in the last few years. Thank you for all the great videos. DP, thank you very much for the support. Gentlemen. LS7. There's plenty of LS7 bands. That's good. And there's definitely something to be proud of. It's it definitely was the high water mark of all of the factory LS motors. Well, NA LS motors, I guess. Short runner, my money is on the intake. Material is probably a little column A, column B. I bet the change in horsepower came from Richard hitting it with a hammer. I will do that though. Straight shot of air, not having to bend around anything. Well, are you talking about the air going into the throttle body and then having to bend? That's actually not what happens to the airflow, because it doesn't come in through the throttle body and then turn and go into a runner. It actually is drawn from the throttle, from the plenum into the runners, and then air refeeds the plenum, if you could think about it that way. I'm thinking about making a new intake manifold. Does plenum shape, design affect output? I had that discussion with Brian today, and I've had that discussion with many, many people, because I don't think plenum volume has a big effect on stuff. That being said, I'm going to do another plenum volume test, because we found some interesting things when we ran different plenum volumes on this 427. So I'm going to show you where plenum volume actually made a difference in power, and I'm happy about it. I'm excited that finally happened, but it only happened on one application and not on another. So it's interesting. So, and my point, I guess, to answer your question is, yes, it can have an effect, although I haven't seen dramatic effects. I like some of the, and I think it might be more susceptible on a 4-cylinder, which is what you have. And I like some of the intake manifolds that I've seen on some very high-end 4-cylinder. Like particularly, I like the, and we've seen this on V8 stuff, because guys have been doing this for years. In fact, they did it back in the turbo era. But having on a 4-cylinder, having a central entry into the plenum, not from one end or the other, having a central entry. And then the good ones that I've seen have a central entry, and then they go out, they have an exit, let's say, on the from the throttle body going to the plenum that tapers out evenly into the common plenum. They're trying to improve airflow distribution, and these are on big boosted applications. They developed a spiral blade throttle bodies in the 30s to reduce throttle losses on supercharged aircraft. They found it also increased horsepower on the test stand. So they were getting rid of the vacuum that would be present between wherever their throttle entry is and the motor. Guys that are looking at changes in airflow from throttle blade angle and shaft size and different. I mean, a barrel valve does that too. A barrel valve just opens the runner up completely. There's no blade there because it's a big barrel with a slot cut in it, and when it rotates, it basically just mimics the opening in the runner, and so it's just runner. There's with no blade in it. So guys do stuff like that. And slide valves, and there are different ways to do it. What's an Iron Duke? I do want to test one of those. Turbo Central. Look at the stuff that the guys at who are the big Honda guys that I see that have the billet stuff. I can't think of their name. I follow them on Instagram, and they've got some pretty nice stuff, and they've got some pretty good intake manifolds, and they've made big power and stuff. So it's good. So our poll is still near. It is, in fact, it is 50-50. That's interesting. Is a 2.3 liter the Iron Duke? Is that what their displacement is? Iron Duke displacement, 150 cubic inches, 2.5 liters. So I remember it primarily from the Fieros. Does having taper and runner change anything? Yes, it does. Is that a good enough answer? So if you think about, this is a little abstract, but if you think about a taper and a runner, if you have a fixed runner diameter, you have two things. You have a fixed volume. You also have, and the volume affects the Helmholtz resonating frequency. Also tapering it, if you taper it, you get rid of some of that volume. So you change that. And also if you taper it, there's thought that you can accelerate the airspeed but I'd like to see that. I'd like to see what the results are. I haven't done enough runner diameter and runner taper, because it's hard to make taper stuff unless you can 3D print it, and then 3D printing it has its own problems with temperature and stuff. But that would be a lot easier to do with 3D printing. Your stepfather said the Iron Duke is the best engine ever for longevity and reliability. I think that the diesel Mercedes guys might have a thing to say about that. I just want to get one of the Iron Dukes and get a running one and just run boost on it, just because you should run boost on everything. And that motor definitely needs it. So we're at 54%. 54% are saying that they're leaning toward throttle body. So how would we figure that out? How would we figure whether the throttle body is a restriction? And I think James will have this data. In fact, I'm certain that he will. So I need to ask him about that. So I'm pretty sure that he was taking the map reading from inside the plenum, which will no longer be there. So on the IR deal, there would be no restriction anyway. Maybe you could take a reading down at the bottom of one of the ports, or actually in the head port. That'd be interesting to see if there's a difference in restriction, a difference in the KPA reading from the entry of the port or near the entry of the port to where the cylinder head is, down closer to the valve, to see if there's some sort of, did it change? Did it become more restrictive down there? I would be curious to see that. But if we have, and the answer is, did we have vacuum present in that manifold with that throttle body size? We know that bigger throttle bodies can add power, and I think we were at the level where we should see that, given that throttle body size. When did they add the crossflow head to the Iron Duke? So I need to ask James, and I'm sure he'll have that. I need to ask him about the vacuum reading present in the throttle with a throttle body test. North Stars. I don't have it. Mark has a North Star. Still underpowered, but a big improvement. I remember reading, because I went down the Iron Duke wormhole on Wikipedia or wherever, and was reading about the things that they changed. And that kind of stuff to me is always interesting. I like hearing about the things that they made, because then I understand, when I'm around people like that, the guys that, and what they argue about and why they argue about, oh, the crossflow head so much better. Yeah. And then you read about, oh, the crossflow head was worth, 7 horsepower or 4 horsepower or 1 or whatever it was, or there was no change. And then you wonder, okay, did it do anything to cooling? And you can kind of understand or get the backstory. And I did that a lot on the 2.2 Dodge and the 2.5 Dodge. A lot of the problems with that was, at least from what I'm reading and what I'm looking at, is the fact that, is difficult for a lot of these guys that were doing this testing. We were even getting data. Like, I love that. And I was talking to Ben about this from the car farm. Like, I read one series where a guy took like a 600 or something, and then it started out running like high 17s or something. And then he went through all these steps of where he got this thing to run like, I don't know, 13s or something. And so he went through all the steps, turning the boost up, doing an exhaust, putting slicks on it, breaking the transmission. There's an automatic trans, fixing the transmission, trying a different converter, trying a stage 2 computer, all the things that he did. And what ultimately happened, the thing that I want to know is, what is the air fuel while you were making all these runs, and what is the timing while you're making all these runs? So I want, we always want as much data as possible. And for a lot of that stuff, it's just not, people don't know that. So the Iron Duke came in the Fear only. No, the Iron Duke was used in a lot of stuff. I just watched your 6-liter intake mod video with the Pro Charger. Yeah, that one was up yesterday, I believe. Will we ever see any Gen 5 stuff? Yeah, there's L83 stuff and LT1 stuff or L86 stuff up on there already. So if you look at that playlist, there's a playlist for. So there's some of those things that I got when Brian was doing Gen 5 testing. I've only run the L83 on the dyno at West Tech. Justin made 824. Yeah, it made 824 at 11 pounds, and it's still climbing a lot because that blower can do more than that. We know that blower can do 1,000 horsepower. You don't need a parts list. I've listed everything that's on there to make that power. All you need is any 6-liter. So go to the wrecking yard or buy a used one or whatever. You don't have to have a new one from Blueprint. You just get a 6-liter. That one had as cast Blueprint LS3 heads on it, or LY6 heads. If you get a 6-liter LY6, it will do the same thing. Quite honestly, you can do this with 317 heads or a cathedral port head also. Just put a decent cam in it. This was that 227, the 11-454 or 54-454-11 comp cam. There's lots of other cams that will work for that. The Brian Tooley hot rod cam would work for that. A Truck Norris cam would drive a little better, but it's easy to make that kind of power with that blower. The safety at E85 to E10 to increase it to E20 to increase octane. Yes, you can mix all of that stuff. Oh, the Pro Charger was a D1 SC, so that's an easy blower to get. That's the go-to kind of street blower. Richard, did you play with nitromethane? I haven't done anything with nitromethane yet. I'm gonna go back to Brian and do that with Brian and James. We got something fun planned. It's got to be fun working with nitromethane, right? That's always fun. And the way that James ran this IR test was pretty cool. The way that I would have done is I would have just made 2 plates and drilled small holes, intersecting holes for the runners so that you could get the thing to idle. Let's say that you drilled, I don't know, 16th-inch holes or 8th-inch holes or whatever in there. And even if the thing idled high, at least you could get it as a starting point. And then what you do is have 2 guys or 1 guy, when you're in the dyno, just slide the plates up. And because they're going to be, they'll be sucked on there pretty hard. You have to slide them up fairly fast because you got to get it, you'd want the hole to be at the bottom and then slide it up so that you start opening the runners and just slide it up and then go to wide open throttle, get out of the dyno cell, and do it. But he's sharp and they were able to do it by manipulating the servo and the load and get the thing even and to start like that, because we don't normally start like that. But that's very, very cool that he's able to do. It's very impressive. Their Power Mark dyno will do things that the 902s won't do. It can run more power and is more sophisticated. Cats are going nuts, racing around knows that Richard's on TV. Nice. Let's say I had an AA525 blow up my 2.2 84 Daytona. Pin for the spider gears came out. The poll is worded incorrectly? Okay, thank you for pointing out. On the 525, were you speed shifting or what was going on when you did that? Why do so many American fast cars use superchargers while German and Japanese cars use turbos? Quite honestly, I'll bet you that there are more LS guys out there, and these would be not factory ones, but there's probably more LS guys running turbos on them than there are guys running superchargers. People are people. Somebody mentioned turbo lag, but turbo lag, to experience like factory turbo lag, if you go back and drive some of the original Audi turbos, because they had such ultra low compression. Same thing, the one that's notorious for it are the original Porsche turbos that were like 6.5 to 1 or something. So they were 3 liters, 6.5 to 1. And and zero runner length in the manifolds. They had that pancake manifold. And so they were just, they're just awful. Yeah, the Audi Quattro was the one that I was thinking of. I remember a friend of mine, Vadim from the show shop, had one, and I remember driving it. I'm like, man, this thing is this is Porsche Turbo-esque, but they're fun when they're on boost. And the thing is, I like that about turbo cars. I like being able to feel that rush. I think it's cool. You don't ever get to feel that on an NA motor. Is a roots blower good? Good for what? Shifting from third to fourth, passing a Chevy truck at 90 miles an hour. I missed shift on. I missed fourth gear a couple of times, twice, as a matter of fact, at least twice, when I was drag racing the Omni. And Ben was nice enough to say, yeah, he said, I drove that thing. We need to adjust the cables on it still. So he was nice and gave me an out, but it was, it's less than precise. GR Super has zero lag. I've yet to find a turbo that has zero lag because it has to have enough exhaust energy. And you can size turbos to be very responsive. A lot of my wife's Mercedes is like that. A lot of and other factory turbo stuff is really good because you size the turbo with the power output and all sort of trickery that they use to get the thing to have. Some of them have full boost at 1800 RPM, which is pretty low. I mean, the downside is that it's not 1,000 horsepower turbo. It's not gonna continue to make lots of boost. In fact, the most of them have falling boost curves by design from the factory, and also by design because of the turbo sizing. My 84 Laser had an automatic. Yeah, that 600 that I was reading the thing on, I think was it Mini Mopars or one of those, are all par, one of those sites that has a lot of 2.2 to 2.5 stuff. I like reading those things. I like reading the step-by-step kind of build stuff, which is kind of why I like doing what I do. The automatics are weak. Yeah, the drag race guys go through them pretty extensively to like the guys that are running 10s. Kill a spark in one or two cylinders until the desired RPM. Oh, so you want to produce the lag? When I first got my FC, third gear was nearly impossible to bank shift because the shifter bushings were trash. Yeah, it can become problematic. And even with like driving a Ferrari that has a gated shifter, even the gated shifter doesn't ensure that they're a little notchy. Doesn't ensure that you go into the right gear, although it gives you an idea. But you do have to be deliberate with that and making that work. Obviously, I never was speed shifting that thing, so to try to drag race it. I have a question for you. Is a 392 any more fragile than a 6.1 or 5.7? I don't know anything about them. I've never done any testing on them. I doubt that it would be more fragile. I don't know what the bore size is. I don't know what the sleeve size is. That's what I would look into if I were you. I just look into I don't know how much power you're trying to make, but I would just look into the thing that would concern me, especially if you're already replacing pistons and rods in it. I wouldn't be concerned with a crank. I'm not normally concerned with the factory cranks, but I want to know what the sleeve thickness is on the 392. And if it's a turbo, unless you already have that motor, you don't need more displacement to make turbo stuff work. Those 525s have a simple roll a roll pin that's pressed into the pin for the spider gears. That's the weak point. Fixes pressed in a solid steel pin. Okay, so the pin, does the pin shear then? Is that the problem? Super productive day. Did the battery location on my 01 Silverado. Nice. Moved to the passenger side and got the Volant scoop attached to the Banks airbox. Didn't get it to log IATs. That's cool. So you had to move the battery to go to the other side for the air intake on that? 01 Silverado. Good. Manual throttle body. Like God and nature intended. On the AMC Indy project, we diverted all flow to Turbo 1 until the back pressure went up. They opened Turbo 2, could get boost, winging the throttle at idle, unbeatable off the turns. So you could make, how do you make boost at idle without any load on the motor? I remember a guy telling me that about his, him telling me that he had boost under cruise or at idle on his Paxton supercharged Corvette. I'm like, dude, you do not have boost at idle. You do not have boost under cruise. You're taking your boost reading from the wrong side of the thing, and you have no bypass valve. I scrolled back to find something, and then I didn't find it. Oh, maybe that was the Hemi question. 700 wheel horsepower. I don't think it would be a problem, but again, I would just check and see which one has thicker sleeves in it. I decided to not turbo my cars. I enjoy beating on it and being reliable. I think going to a 4-cylinder EcoBoost and an MX-5 gearbox might be the way if I want a turbo. Okay. Solid shear pins only find the next weakest link. Is that in the 525 trans that you're talking about? Richard, I moved the battery to mainly distribute the weight better from behind the driver's headlight to up by the firewall on the passenger side. Up by the firewall on the passenger side. Is there room over there? I can't remember now looking at the, mine's an 02 Silverado. I'm anti fly-by-wire. I think I have my son even, because we've run across that with Lisa's car too. Just stepping on the gas and nothing happens. It's like, hey, I needed to go out, and if it happens at a time where like I'm trying to go like to get in front of traffic that's coming this way, like Highway 50 up at Tahoe. But it didn't want to do anything, and it wasn't throwing any codes, no lights. It wasn't saying, hey, look, there's a traction limited problem, whatever the deal is. I wasn't, I didn't just like, pop the throttle and surprise it and go, hey, whoa, what are we doing? So I don't like the throttle. I don't like asking the throttle to do what I want the throttle to do. I like telling it. When I want wide open throttle or part throttle or no throttle, it should do that, and that should not be a suggestion. Problem with making power is the trans or rear end grenades. So can new GMVH run E20 without changing the tune? I don't know what you mean by new GMs. Does the vehicle that you are talking about have a flex fuel sensor? Then those can. Electronic throttle body is really good if you can wire it up. They break just like a throttle cable. Diesel trucks and some SUVs had dual batteries. They use a factory tray for that side. Oh, cool. A direct bolt-in. That's nice. My Roots 471 has boost off idle. Oh, mean when you step on the gas? Yeah, Roots blowers are pretty positive displacements. At 2 psi at the turbo and vacuum the manifold at 70 miles an hour, 2,700 RPM. Do you not have a blow-off valve on your turbo? Because if you have vacuum in the manifold, the blow-off valve should be open, and you shouldn't be building any boost. You don't want to be building boost into the closed throttle body, because that's fuel mileage if you care about that. Got a 350 small block Chevy and a 3-speed trans from some random car or truck. I don't know where I should start. Well, I would start with, does the thing run? It's not an actual shear pin. Yeah, no, I get what you mean. It's a roll pin. It's supposed to stay in place, like the ones that we tap in to hold like shift linkages and things. I'm trying to remember. Oh, the Honda has one like that. The Honda has one on the shift linkage. Nitrous at idle. The thing is, with when you're driving down the road on like a roots blower or a centrifugal blower, if you have no bypass valve, it will definitely be producing boost. The thing that stops it a little bit is that you have no airflow going into it on a roots blower, because you have, there's no throttle angle, so you have vacuum there. But I remember on a Vortec, as you're driving down the road, especially if you have no blow-off valve, if you're driving down the road at 2,500 or 3,000 RPM, where the thing would be making boost against a closed throttle blade, it makes boost there, and that's why you try to let it all come out. I have a blow-off valve. It's next to the throttle body after the intercooler and 8 feet of pipe. Well, and you want your blow-off valve close to the throttle body, because that's where the initial pressure spike is going to happen. Based on the 350 being extremely hard to turn by hand, I'm guessing it doesn't run. So you're going to take it apart. Let us know what happens after you take it apart, and if it will still run with minor, things like a ball hone and freeing up the rings and stuff. That's kind of fun if you can get it to do that. Take a look at the camshaft, take a look at the bearings, take a look at the cylinder walls, take a look at the valves and the valve job. All that stuff can be looked at. And then you could decide a 350 can make good power, and especially with boost can make a lot of power. Marvel Mystery Oil. Yeah, that's another way to get it to crank over. We used to put transmission fluid in rotaries to when they were locked up, to get the apex seals unlocked. Then you just start it up and burn all that transmission fluid off. It's smoky for a while, but it still works. I remember walking in, seeing a guy do that, because this guy used to turn these RX-7s. He used to go buy them that had seized up motors, and that's what he would do. He would pour the transmission fluid down the carburetor and work the thing back and forth, and pretty soon it would free up. We'd spin it and spin it and spin it, and then work it around. And then I remember walking in one time to where the shop was, and I'm walking through the parking lot, and there's an RX-7 out there running, and it's just blowing smoke out. I'm like, oh yeah, that thing's done. He goes, oh no, watch. He goes, watch and see what happens. I'm like, no, that motor's toast. It's junk. He said, no, it's not. Watch what happens. And then pretty soon there's less and less. Boom, 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 boom. He's like, see, it's fixed. I said, dude, you have to tell me what you did to do that. All 6 headers went into the stainless Y. A small turbo diverter valve in the Y. Barnett Navarro applied for a patent on the valve. So is this like, it sounds like a quick spool valve is what I'm envisioning. But even a quick spool valve, even diverting all of the energy at idle is not going to make a turbo make boost because it doesn't have enough speed. Italian tune-up, yeah. This guy actually that was doing it was he may have been Russian, which was very, very cool. I think so. I think I got that right. I think he was Russian. That was cool. I was adamant that little RX-7, that motor was toast. I like RX-7s. I thought it was cool, but I also thought that rotary motor was done. He's like, no, it'll be good. He said, actually, it's probably going to run really good when it's done. I'm like, I'm skeptical, and I wasn't that nice about it. I'm much nicer now, because back then, 20, 30, 50 years ago, whatever, that's when you know everything. When you're young, you know everything. You're pretty convinced that you know everything. Automatic transmission fluid down the 4-barrel intake. Yes, because they had factory 4 barrels on the. This was a 12A, so you just pour it down in there. Preset on replacing LS1. I think I'm going to go modern Hemi. Hemi is a good motor. Honda 88. I think I bought a Prelude V20 carbureted Prelude. I just remember how neat it was to have side drafts on it. The Kilo 4-barrel. Yeah, I think it was a Mikuni, right? Or a Keen or something. The little 4-barrel carburetor. I think I remember looking at my friend's 81, and it was I know it was a 4-barrel, and I thought it said Mikuni on it. I remember I was surprised that it had a. The 13B, yeah, that was the big motor. Not big like a 3-rotor, but bigger, certainly bigger than his 12A. But it would rev, and I remember it had the little bing, bing. It had the little over rev, but you could rev past the alarm clock. I remember doing one with Mazda Tricks or Mazda Speed, one of those guys. I remember sitting in on watching him rebuild it and or doing a rebuild on one. I don't remember if it was a 12A or 13B, but it's pretty cool because I didn't know a lot about him. This was way back. I didn't know very much about him at the time, and it was cool to watch him go through it. Have you had any much experience with an EcoBoost? I have not, other than running them on the chassis dyno, but not on the engine dyno. I'll have to check out a quick spool valve. All the quick spool valve does, Jim, is I'm assuming it's JM. The quick spool valve basically just diverts all of the exhaust energy into one side of a divided turbo, and it works pretty well to get the thing spooled up, and then it opens up and allow so you're kind of doing what a sequential turbo does. You're just doing it with one turbo. I was a service manager at Mazda dealership the year before I met you in Hiko. Nice. We do that automatic transmission fluid pour as a matter of course on Mazdas for the oil consumption issue. Yeah, they did do that. They did consume oil because didn't they have? I thought his 12A had it either had oil injection. Yeah, it had oil injection in it. I think right. Didn't they have that as part of the carburation or something? My alarm was at 9,000. Yeah, I remember it was being up there pretty high. Oh, an RX4 coupe, nice. V20A3 on the one that I bought had side draft carbs like a motorcycle. Okay, cool. Go over cam cylinder head with dual key-in side draft carburetors. Oil injectors in the intake manifold. Okay, I knew it had oil injection. Because did it have a reservoir, or was it taking oil from the engine oil? Premix is a must with the rotary. Yeah, but nobody was going to pre-mix fuel like in the tank and stuff. So at least they realized that they had to do it for them. How's our poll doing? We only got a couple minutes left. 64% are saying throttle body was the restriction. RX-7's take it from the engine oil. Okay, that would make more sense. That way they could just that they wanted to make it so that people would be doing the thing that they normally do, which is that people will add oil to as well. Hopefully they check the oil, but they will add oil if it needs oil. We had the RX2 land speed record in our showroom. Oh, that's very cool. How fast did that car go? We need to see that 12 rotor thing. I'm curious to see how fast that RX2 went. I like those little cars. I didn't even know about them before I started running. I don't think I knew about those before I started running my Mustang in showroom stock, because there were a lot of IT rotary powered RX3s and stuff, and 4s, I think, or 2s and 3s. My MG had oil injection. 8212 engine and a light blue car. Yeah, his was a black RX-7 GSL, I think. So his is like leather and sunroof and all kinds of stuff. $60 of boost on a 210-inch motor. That's getting with the program. Pre-mix my dog's food. Issues were oil injected. The R10s had a reservoir. Oh, to fill up for the oil. LA champion spark plug dyno. Dick Jones. Jones cams. I'll have to look that up. I don't recognize that. Do you know guys would go with gapless rings? I don't know. I'd like to see. I ran gapless rings because I was having to rebuild the thing anyway, and they supplied a set of rings for my Engine Masters motor, so we ran them. I didn't do a back-to-back test on them, so I don't know if they did something. I could ask. I could ask Lake. He would go into detail. He's really good tech guy, but I've never run them on a boosted motor, and they're not technically gapless anyways. They do overlap and they do slide, but there's no slot in the middle of them. Rob's trying to figure out a way to time it where it's not firing more than one rotor at a time. GSL, I think that's what mine is. Got a sunroof. I haven't seen it in 2 years. It's safely stored. Building inspectors hate car hoarders. Yeah. I know I need to go get my Mustang. Time to get it running. Luckily, I have some good. Mark Sanchez is really the Mustang guy. He will be able to help me with if I don't know what it is. I've done a lot of Mustang stuff, so but he's really good with making all the factory stuff work. Seen videos about extra octane being a waste, but my old XR6 gets 100 kilometers to the tank on the highway with more expensive fuel. I don't know why the fuel mileage would be better with a change in octane. I would be curious about that. I don't know how that, unless the only thing I could think is if you have a system where that's taking timing away, but I don't know why you would be getting, I don't know why you'd be getting detonation at cruise when you're trying to get fuel mileage, unless you're not under cruise and you're not really trying to get fuel mileage. But if you're retarding timing and getting worse fuel mileage because of it, I could see something like that. But the octane itself shouldn't change it shouldn't change the tune much, and it shouldn't change the amount of fuel that you're using. Hey, can I get help with deciding between a set of heads? Yeah, just ask away. LS the Fox and take it to the LS Fest. I could put a Fox motor in the Fox and take it to the Ford Fest, and then put an LS in something else. Maybe the less timing makes me have to use the throttle more to accelerate uphills. Yeah, again, it's hard to determine fuel mileage unless the test is very, very specific on what you're doing every time, and it's exactly the same. That's really hard to do. When you're tuning timing, do you just go till power starts to lessen and back it off? No, we don't go till power drops off. On the dyno, you'd go till you don't gain power. Because when you go to where power starts to drop off, you're getting much, much closer to hurting the motor. It's not necessary to do that. If you add timing and you get a gain, you add timing, you get a smaller gain, you add timing, and you get no gain, you're there. Adding more timing doesn't do anything. We can add another degree and go, yeah, it's still not doing anything. It's still not adding power. Then that's all the timing that it needs. Jim, he has to, after we ran Indy, put in a fuel limit, essentially banning us. Jones did the cams for the Chevrolet Indy project. He has the best roller profiles from GM R&D. Cool. So if you're building a 60 pounds of boost, 210-inch Indy motor, then he's the guy to go to. I've never run 60 pounds on anything. That's pretty cool. A Fox with a twin overhead cam V8. I mean, like a mod motor? I was looking at the PRC ASCAS 5.3s, but those have 64cc chambers versus my stock 706s. What do those heads flow? Do they flow enough to justify what you're doing? What is the build looking for? What are you doing? A 64 versus a 61 is not a big change. You could mill them and get down to 61 if you wanted to do that. But are those PRC ASCAS heads, do they flow a lot more than a 706 does? And do they flow it in a range that you're taking advantage of with the camshaft you have? And are trying to make a lot more power? All those questions need to be answered. So overbuilt, you're going to run 87 gas with water in a race motor? Guys, I mean, way back in the Spirco days and stuff, guys ran water injection on stuff when that was their hey, we're going to do this because we have high compression from the muscle car era, and now we have bad gas, and so they were doing that. But I don't know that I would do that for a race application. Hemi the Fox and take it to Moparty. Well, I luckily I'm a Mopar owner, so I can go to Moparty with the Mopar that I have. I know my Camry gets 28 to 30 with 91 and 25 to 26 with 87, both on the highway. I'm sure it has to do with the knock sensor changing the timing. But I don't. When you're cruising down the freeway, there should be no way to have detonation. I don't know how you have detonation at part throttle, even with lots of timing. That would be hard to do because there's almost no load. There's 20 or 30 foot-pounds or something of load. Just pretend the only fuel available is 87 and water and make it work. Okay. Water injection is banned in many racing rules because it works so well. Love to get a Dominion 32 valve head and cam set for a small block Chevy. I think Visor is going to do it on his new turbo 2023 Mustang and make hordes of power. Water injection has been around a long time. You should. I recommend that you do it. You should try it. You should try water injection as the answer to all the performance. I think everybody should try stuff, and everybody should test it and see if it works. Toyota recommends 91 in their Camry or whatever that was. That seems odd that they would recommend premium for something like that. No brakes. If I was putting a turbo on it, I would just put junkyard GT40 heads on it, and I'd put a cam in it. And you could probably find a used B or E or F or X or whatever, something that'll fit. AFR heads are fantastic, and a 165 head on a 302 is a great setup. But it's not necessary for your turbo, because with the turbo, you can make more power than you're going to use. The RX-2 went over 150, beat by Racing Beats Mazda RX-3 at over 160. And smoke when the RX-7 came out, yeah. Because an RX-7 is a lot swoopier. Richard believes that Boost is far cheaper than currently buying all the overpriced performance parts. I don't know that. Well, you don't know what Richard believes. so we'll leave it at that. Thinking about the enforcers, my IS300 2JZ hates 87, pings like crazy in hot weather. But if I add 6 ounces of acetone to 5 gallons or so, it's not near as bad. Yeah, octane booster can help that. I would really love to do a test with an actual test facility that can measure detonation. So I want to see what the octane booster does. I want to find out how much it changes the actual octane rating. I've been told that it doesn't do very much. That if we take these typical octane boosters that we get from the store, 104 pluses and of the world or whatever, that was, I don't know even if they still make that now, but it was very popular back in the day. I'd like to see, because I'm told that there are some that help, but I'm told that, and I don't know how accurate this stuff is, I'm told that most of them don't even add it a full, like they don't take it from 91 octane to 92 octane. They take it from 91 octane to 91 point something octane. That's not much of a change, but I'd like to know that. I'd like to see about, the boostane stuff is what is in particular one of the ones that I would want to test. This would be a 351 Windsor bottom end. Okay. Yeah, the Enforcers would be good, or Skip Whites, or if you want to put an, I would rather have an aluminum head on a small block Ford. But again, most guys are, I talk to a lot of guys that are doing it on a budget. So that's the first step on the low budget thing, is go from a stock one to a GT40, and you could port either one of those yourself and improve it enough to have it be worthwhile for the porting. I think it's cheaper to turbo it versus NA. Yeah, I mean, it's way easier to make, because if changing the power by 50% with a turbo is really easy. And if you change the NA power, then that 50% becomes even more. And I like doing it that way. And especially the first couple of mods that you do are the big things. Those things make a big difference. And you can still, with a turbo, you can still have lots of power, lots of torque, and lots of drivability, which is a lot of times the thing that people want. And on that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up and listening to me once again and chat at night. And again, cheers to my friend up in Tahoe. Makes me feel good knowing that there are other people out there like that. And I'll see you guys all tomorrow. But if you haven't, please go take a look at the video that I put up. LS3 versus LS7 head test. And then the very cool IR test that James did. Good stuff, man.